talk about a huge shift that's taken place in our understanding of tolerance. Actually, there have been a lot of things being redefined in our culture. I was thinking back to the 1990s when Senator Moynihan talked about the new definitions of deviance, redefining deviance. And then we've been in an era talking about the redefinition of marriage. And now you're talking about two different definitions of tolerance, an old tolerance and a new tolerance. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, tolerance has been a subject of reflection as long as people have recorded reflection. You can read it in the ancient Greeks. Tolerance in the past has been bound up with reflection on how far you can allow people to disagree with the established norms of society, and then what sanctions should be imposed upon them if they disagree. So if you have some group that's advocating the overthrow of government, then the government slams down and says, no, you can't do that. That's wicked. We won't tolerate that. If you advocate in our society pedophilia, you can't actually start practicing it without getting slammed. Every society has some forms of tolerance and intolerance, and in the past it's always been bound up with how far outside the accepted norms you can go before meeting not only social pressure, but legal pressure or military pressure, police pressure, constraint, physical constraint brought on by the powers of government. And there have been lots of discussions in the Greco-Roman history and then in Christianized Europe that talked about it might be good for society to allow a certain amount of deviance, of disagreement. But if you allow too much, then you might be unsettling the universal church in the Middle Ages or something of that order. And so there were discussions along such lines in Calvin's Geneva, discussions along such lines in Knox's Scotland. And this is something that's come along again and again and again. But in all such discussion in the past, that old tolerance is bound up with the question of how far society can let you go when society disagrees with you, when society says you're wrong, when society says you're advocating something that's harmful, wicked, silly, stupid, but it's still saying that you're wrong. We just allow you to get on with it. That's tolerating them. In other words, the presupposition is you have to disagree with somebody before you tolerate them. But the new tolerance is increasingly saying it's wrong to disagree with somebody. It's wrong to actually call anybody wrong, at least in certain domains. It's wrong to say that another religion is wrong. It's wrong to say that in certain domains, opinions that disagree with you are wrong. So now you're being invited to say, I'm a capitalist, you're a communist, but I can't say that you're doing anything wrong. I agree with you, you're communism, even though I'm a capitalism, I tolerate you. If instead I say that you're wrong, then I'm intolerant, I'm a bigot. And that, I want to argue, is not only intellectually incoherent, it is morally bankrupt. It's intellectually bankrupt because I don't think it's intellectually incoherent because I don't think that tolerance has any coherence as a notion until you disagree with people. You've got to say, I think your ideas are silly or wrong or misguided or sad or tragic or broken or silly or irresponsible or not intelligent or whatever, but I allow you to articulate them in any case because this is a society that's free along that particular axis. I tolerate you, but you've got to disagree. To say, I don't disagree with you and that's why I tolerate you is just incoherent. Do you see? But that's what the new tolerance is demanding. It's demanding that you refuse to say somebody's wrong. So that's not only intellectually incoherent, I want to argue, it's also morally bankrupt in that it stifles conversation. It stifles discussion. It stifles, you can't have a serious discussion to win people to another point of view until you actually find out where you disagree. If you're saying that deep down you're actually all saying the same thing and it's all another manifestation of the great out there, then it's impossible to have serious conversation. It's just morally blah. There's nothing you can sink your teeth into. So what you need instead is disagreement, but civility. And then you still have to make some choices as a society as to what you allow. Every society makes choices. But we've moved in several domains to allowing almost anything except the choice not to allow certain things. And at that point, you see, it becomes inconsistent as a structure of thought, as a way of approach. The virtue of tolerance, the old tolerance, the virtue of it, the strength of it at its best, is that it's a parasite. That is, it's parasitic on some bigger system of thought. There's some system of thought that is widely accepted in the culture, and then the virtue of tolerance is how far you allow deviation from that norm. So it presupposes already that there's a norm in place. It's parasitic on there being a bigger norm. The new tolerance has become the ultimate good. It's become the ultimate virtue. It's not parasitic on anything else. And that becomes incoherent, morally bankrupt. It stifles conversation and is leading toward a new police state.
So the old tolerance is really a secondary virtue.
Of course.
The new tolerance is the
virtue.
Supreme virtue. Yeah.
And it's not really tolerant.
Well, that's the next step, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That is the next step. As a pastor, it really started to dawn on me how this was taking root in people's minds. When I started pastoral ministry, which I'm not going to tell you when that was, but it was some time ago.
It's when they had ox carts.
Yeah, that's right. If you said, what is the most well-known Bible verse, it was John 3:16.
Yeah.
The football games and everything else. Nowadays, I think every pastor knows this. If you say, what is the most well-known Bible verse? It's the verse, judge not lest you be judged. Just about everybody knows that, ripped out of context, but that is the one Bible verse that our culture now appeals to, and that's it.
Yeah, that's right. And they don't remember, that's Matthew 7:1. They don't remember that Matthew 7:6 tells us not to cast our pearls before swine, which means somebody's got to figure out who the pigs are. But we'll let that one pass.
But is it accurate to say that the old tolerance was really in many ways a Christian virtue, by the best of Christian living, that it was shaped by the view that, well, people are made in the image of God, therefore we'll respect you even if we think you're crazy?
Yes.
Okay.
But
go ahead. You wrote the book. I'm just asking the question.
No, it's a very good question. But the point is that I would want to argue that under the old system of tolerance, every society has some measure of tolerance. Yeah. And the best Christian tolerance, it seems to me, thinks things through very well. But don't forget that for Christians likewise, we believe in a God who is going to judge all men and women. At the end of the day, the new heaven and the new earth is not characterized by spectacular tolerance of other religions. That's called idolatry. And so the Christian tolerance is worked out in the tension between claiming that Jesus is Lord now over history, and his word is right and good and clean, and it's for the good of society and so on. So if a Christian votes, let's say, against the practice of homosexuality on the ground of Christian belief that it is immoral to practice homosexuality, that's for the good of society, and it's part of our confession that Jesus is Lord. And not to think along those lines is to deny that Christ is Lord. Yet at the same time, we may conclude for all kinds of reasons that just as we don't legislate with judicial sanctions against everybody who ever tells a lie, we may decide in certain circumstances that we won't legislate against that too. But that's a judgment call that's got to be worked out within the framework of living between the already and the not yet, while the church itself doesn't compromise on the issue. And so there is always a tension in the church on such matters, while we're claiming everything for Christ. There is no place, as Kuyper would put it, where Christ does not stand and say, "This is mine." And so you want to say that, and on the other hand, you live between the already and the not yet, and the question is how to act wisely and faithfully to Christ as the body of believers on the one hand, and how to hold up the standards of truth and morality and integrity on the other hand for the whole world, while at the same time recognizing that the church cannot impose discipline on the whole world. Christ at the end of the age will do that. And as soon as we say that Christ at the end of the age will do that, there is a heaven to be gained, there is a hell to be shunned, that is already viewed as intrinsically intolerant in our culture, because we're saying that some people are wrong, and some people will go to hell. And yet we live with those tensions all the time. We cannot, as Christians, possibly say that the ultimate virtue is tolerance. You cannot possibly say that if you confess Jesus as Lord. On the other hand, you still have to say that tolerance is a wonderful virtue, forbearing with one another, forgiving one another, recognizing that we're not to judge before the time, and we're not to be judgmental. And at the end of the day, Christ will see that every knee will bow, and he alone will judge the secrets of the hearts on the last day, and all the rest. And how that works out societally is really a complex issue that has to do with the relationship between the church and the state and a whole lot of other issues. In my mind, this book came out of the Christ and Culture book. In other words, the Christ and Culture book had a little section on tolerance, and I realized it was part of the impetus as well, that I needed to do more thinking about that one sub-point.